Hello, this is Jenny Fern, and this year in 2020, I wanted to keep up with some of the hobbies that I really enjoy, photography and writing, mainly, as my focus for this year, by having 52 prompts for each, so that I would work on each prompt one per week. So this first week, my writing prompt is new and my photography prompt is self-portrait. So with that in mind, I have some assorted video clips and photographs from the first week of January. And I'll be sharing some of my other hobbies as well in this video. So I did do just some general nature and plant photography, one of my favorite subjects to photograph, during this period when I was also going to focus on the self-portrait prompt. So that's what some of these photos are. I'm also discovering new plants all the time, either that pop up in my yard or that I find growing. So for the writing prompt new, I had just gone to a New Year's Eve party, and so I was feeling kind of inspired by that idea. The other thing that I was kind of thinking about, like new beginnings kind of thing, was that because I live in an area so heavily affected by wildfires, that maybe this character had just lost his family home and was kind of trying to start anew, and then also having like some new society type things, loosely inspired by A Woman on the Edge of Time, which I had just finished reading in December. So my idea was to have a character who had undergone the loss of a home. This last October, we actually had to evacuate from our home here because of a wildfire. And in the past, we also had a really devastating wildfire. So it is inspired by that. And I guess maybe partly because of hearing so much about the Australian wildfire or wildfires, it kind of pushes that to the forefront of my mind a little bit more. So I wanted this character to have a bit of hope for the future environmentally. And so he meets somebody who is leading a life that is more sustainable and regenerative, although we don't get so far into that in this piece of writing. And then for the self-portrait, I ended up just wearing one of my favorite shirts. It's for a band called Mrs. Magician, and standing in front of a wall lit by the sun coming through the window, where I was playing with framing and lighting and that kind of thing. And so that's what I chose for the self-portrait. I just loved how the light was coming into the room and thought it would be a nice framing for a photograph. So I suppose I'll now share my actual writing and read it out to you, even though I am not the most confident in reading aloud, to be completely honest. But here it goes. So you can stop if you don't want to hear the story, or if you would like to continue, you can. New. To me, 2020 sounds like the most futuristic year since 2000. But in reality, I'm at a high school friend's New Year's Eve party 2 months after my childhood home burned down in a fire. Can you even call it a wildfire anymore if it blows through towns like a stiff breeze? I had just moved back in with my parents that summer, finishing my final 2 years of college studying linguistics. I hadn't gotten a job yet, and I had nowhere to go, so I went back. Home hadn't changed much since I'd been gone. The mint had gotten out of control on the side yard, and instead of a front lawn, there was gravel, bushy grasses, and cacti. It saves on the water bill, my dad said when I asked about it. He would never say it was to save the water itself. If it wasn't for money, it wasn't for anything. Take me moving back home. I paid a small amount of rent, far less than I would in the real world, and I helped with chores around the house. I was cheaper than hired labor, my dad would say, as I emptied full lawnmower bag into the green waste bin. The backyard was still grass. We had many arguments about how I couldn't, or I didn't, find a job. I know part of it was that I focused on my coursework during my final year when other folks were interviewing. My dad was convinced it was because my studies were careerless. I tried early on to contextualize my academic interests with something someone would pay me to do. I knew I loved linguistics, so I thought maybe I could pair it with computer science. The problem was, I hated programming. Everything about code made me frustrated and clammy. I would be up late in my bed, illuminated by the cold light of my laptop, while frantically trying to get the output I'd intended. Then the house burned down in a fire, something that we'd come to fear each October ever since the altogether surprising firestorm in 2017. My parents up and moved out of the state, no longer feeling any attachment to a place that would scorn them like that, and I had to rent out a bedroom in a house full of strangers, paid for by serving wine at a tasting room, a job I was very happy to have gotten. At least I'd successfully decluttered, a resolution I could firmly tick off before even starting the year. So here, now, I am shoving my face with charcuterie tidbits, getting plum drunk on other people's champagne, and listening to the parents of people I went to high school with talk about the people they know who'd lost their homes. They'd react with their heads cocked, brows crinkled, with a surface-level compassion. Oh, how sad. I am one of them, obviously, but I decide not to tell them that, because it seems like it would bring them down to know that a displaced was among them. Then I hear a voice coming from the living room, across the kitchen from me. The world isn't some warm, soft ear to whisper your sweet nothings into anymore, the voice says. It has my full attention. I peek my head out of the kitchen and see her. She still has that swooping nose, the mole on her chin, eyebrows darker than her complexion would indicate. Her hair is dyed red now, fading slightly, but I know that voice. It's Carrie Young. She had been in my classes throughout high school. In those times, she had been opinionated, a know-it-all, and she voraciously read romance novels whenever she was bored in class. My junior year, I was hopelessly in love with her. Not her, actually. I didn't know her that well, but what I conceived of her. I had always been kind of annoyed by her, but eventually she grabbed so much of my attention that I decided that annoyance had been a defense mechanism for my true feelings. She dated a lot of people in high school, but never me. No, she says, arguing with a boy wearing a college sweatshirt, probably someone's younger brother. The world is a tough leather bag that you can't take anything out of that you didn't put in first. He widens his eyes and wrinkles his face in irritation. Clearly, he is no longer interested listening to her. As a society, we've been systematically degrading our soil for years. Somehow, homeowners have been convinced that 1, they should grow a monoculture of grass on their land instead of, say, fruit trees or lettuce or beans, anything useful. And 2, that they should cut this grass with powered equipment and throw the grass out in a bin where any of its conceivable usefulness is taken away. It's all backwards. She flings her hand into the air dramatically. Who would want to keep their grass clippings? The boy says, having paid enough attention to continue to argue. It could be used as a natural fertilizer in compost. If you just leave it be, it's better than having the city haul it off away from the land that produced it. She is cupping a glass of red wine, and it sloshes about as she angrily gesticulates. I'd heard about her older brother, as told by our AP English literature teacher, as either a cautionary tale or some sort of retrospective. He decided to forego college and instead work at a local farm collective. Our teacher explained that the boy had been heavily inspired by Walden, and that as a teacher he was conflicted about his influence. I wonder if Kara was wooed by the farm life too. I realize now that the conversation has gone quiet, and I've been staring at her, and now she's looking at me. I shake my empty champagne flute at her and head back into the kitchen. I feel like I'm back in high school doing things that don't make sense because I'm not sure how people work yet. I set the glass down on the counter next to the sink and snake around some women taking a fresh-baked lasagna out of the oven. Ah yes, the New Year's tradition of too much booze and a whole tray of lasagna? I walk along the dark hallway past the family room, seeing a ring of light around the bathroom door. My escape plan is foiled. I keep walking out into the cool garage. I open the fridge there. This will be my excuse. It's starting to make sense now. Empty champagne flute wave means that I'm out and would prefer beer. I'm in the fridge, scooting aside energy drinks when I hear the door to the garage open. I was hoping I would find you out here. It's Kara's voice. I stay in the fridge, knowing I'll need to come out soon. Hey, I say, and grab 2 cans of beer. I exit the fridge. Here, I say, turning to face her. She's wearing a pointed party hat with a little elastic band under her chin. She takes the beer and leans against the wall between the steps and the plywood shelving. She's looking lanky, her head cocked. What are you doing back in town? She asks. I work at a winery, I say. She nods loosely. I moved back too. Do you live with your parents? I ask. She shakes her head. Did you ever meet my brother? She asks. Andy? She seems restless, her body constantly moving. I shake my head. I've heard about him, I say. We live together, she says. We have some property a little north of here. It's a bit in the sticks, but I like it. Was it affected by the fire? I ask. Only smoke, she says. Her voice is becoming raspier, almost a whisper. I nod and finally open my beer with a hiss. You lost your house, she says. Her voice gives out at the end. I nod as I take a long sip. I am sorry about that, she says. She looks into my eyes, and I don't feel like I'm in high school anymore. Why are we here? I hear myself ask. At this party? I guess we had nothing better to do. She takes the party hat off and rubs the underside of her chin. Do you want to try it on? She says, holding the hat up, still leaning against the wall. Sure, I smile. She comes to me, stretching out the elastic. Lean down, she says. You're too tall. I lean down and she puts the hat on me. Her fingers are cold against the bottom of my chin as she adjusts the elastic. She smiles up at me, her eyes crinkling at the corners. You look great, she says. Then she gets on her toes, puts her hands on my shoulders, and kisses me. It isn't something slobbery and drunk. I can taste the IPA on her lips, as I'm sure she can on mine. But I don't feel like we're outside of ourselves. She steps back and then resumes her position against the wall. Do you still read romance novels? I ask. She purses her lips bemusedly, her eyes glittering. Yes, she says. And I plant trees, I argue with meatheads, and I still want to know more than the other people I'm in a room with. But I'm happy now. I'm glad, I say. Are you happy? She asks. I can't look at her in the eyes anymore. My eyes shift until they find a crack in the paved garage floor. No, I say, but I think I could get there. She peels herself away from the wall and turns toward the steps, leaving the garage. You should come by my property sometime, she says. I find it helps with those kinds of things. I follow her up the cement steps, back into the party.